Hey Chevra, what's going on? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Hey of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 105. Chevra, it's a very exciting day today in Babel on. God willing, we will complete Masechta Ayruvin. Pretty exciting, right? My, oh my, what a journey it's been. But before we get there, we have a little bit to learn. A little bit of an overview before we begin. It mostly deals with Beis hamikdash kind of things. How to remove a dead sheretz from the Beis hamikdash. Where do you have to remove this dead sheretz from? What happens if you bring a dead sheretz into the Beis hamikdash? Is that bad? And performing repairs on the temple. And then the Gemara ends in kind of a interesting way. Chevre, let's go weiter. So we are on Daf Kuf Daled Amud Beis. We stopped a little bit high up on the page at the Mishnah, and we will kind of take it from there. Sheretz shenimtza b'mikdash. If you have a dead sheretz that is found in the Beis hamikdash, let's say you're hanging out in the Beis hamikdash and you're like, hey, is that a dead mouse? And you're like, yeah, it's a dead mouse. What do you do? So kohen motzio be'emyano. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says that what happens is if a Kohen finds a dead mouse, a dead sheretz, okay, so he picks it up with his belt so that he doesn't become tummy from the dead sheretz, and the belt will become, right, the dead sheretz is an avatuma, the belt will become a rishon latuma, the belt will not then be matame him, so, and he removes the little dead sheretzy guy out of the Beis hamikdash in that manner. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'tzvas shel eitz shelo larbos esatuma. Rabbi Yehuda says that rather than use your clothing, you should use like a wooden tweezers kind of thing to extract this little sheretzy guy. Yeah, that's what you do. Now each one kind of has pluses and minuses, right? The advantage of using your belt is that your belt is already on your body and you can get out this mouse ASAP. The disadvantage is that you're spreading tumah because now the tumah of the sheretz spreads to your belt. The advantage of Rabbi Yehuda's position is that you don't spread any tumah. You'll use these wooden tweezers, pshutei klei eitz, they don't become tameh, so you're not spreading any tumah, but the disadvantage is that the sheretz is sticking around in the Beis hamikdash for longer. Anyways, mehechan motziin also. Now, from which areas of the Beis hamikdash do you need to remove a sheretz? If you find a dead sheretz in like the big area, like right when you walk into the temple where everyone's just kind of hanging out and the Yisraelim go and all the people, the big courtyard, do you have to remove a sheretz from there? So the Mishnah says, mina heichal, so you have to remove the sheretz from the heichal, mina ulam, umibena ulam v'lamazbeach, divrei Reb Shimon ben Anas. So, okie dokie. So I was learning this Gemara with a friend of mine, Reb Josh Weinberg, and so we kind of went over the Beis hamikdash construction. He knows the construction of the Beis hamikdash pretty well. Anyways, so basically when you walk into like the big like Temple Mount kind of thing, so you walk in and you're like in this big open kind of chutzner, and then the first place you would walk into would be the Ezras Nashim. From the Ezras Nashim, you would basically then go into the Azara, right? You pass through Ezras Yisrael. I think that the Ezras Yisrael, I think we ascertained that was a little bit inner more. And then from there, you would go into like the, so from the Ezras Yisrael, from the Ezras Nashim, there would be the Ezras Yisrael, right? And then you would walk in, and then you would get to like the, Azara, okay? Now, in the Azara, that's like where the Mizbeach was, like the Mizbeach HaChitzon, okay? And then there was the area after the Mizbeach HaChitzon that was called Bein HaUlam v'Lamizbeach, the area in between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. Then you get to the Ulam, which was like this big kind of like tall gate thing. And then you would pass through the Ulam into the Heichal. And in the Heichal is where there was like the Shulchan and the menorah. Okay, so these distinctions are going to be kind of important now. So let's just review, kind of also for myself as much for everybody else. So basically, from the big Temple Mount Chutzner area, you would go into that, you would enter into the Ezras Nashim. From the Ezras Nashim, you would then go into like that, I think it's called the Ezras Kohanim, I think. And that's like where the Mizbeach was. So that Azara is what we're going to see Rabbi Akiva is going to be talking about in a second. Then after the Mizbeach in the Azara, there will be this gap between the Mizbeach and the Ulam. That's called what's Bein Ulam V'la Mizbeach. Then there was the Ulam, which was like the gateway, let's say, to get to the Heichal. And then there was the Heichal, which is like where the menorah and the Shulchan was. Okay. So Reb Shimon ben Nana says that you have to remove dead sheretzes from the Heichal, from the Ulam, and from the area between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. Rabbi Akiva omer kol makom shechayav an azdon o karis v'ashigas o chatas misham motziin oso. So Rabbi Akiva says that any place you would be chayav if you go into the Beis Hamikdash when you're tummy. So for example, if you're tamei and you go into the Beis Hamikdash, so any area where if you go by accident, you'd have to bring a korban chatas, and if you go on purpose, you'd be chayav karis. So you have to remove a dead sheretz from there, and that's basically includes the azara, right? Includes this area, after the Ezras Nashim. Then there's the Ezras Kohanim, I think it's called. And so even if there's a sheretz there, you'd also have to remove it. Okay, and that's really the big nafkamina between Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva, right? If there's a dead sheretz in the azara, do you have to remove it? Rabbi Shimon ben Nana says no. Rabbi Akiva says yes. But Rabbi Akiva would also agree that if there was a sheretz in the heichal, you'd have to remove it. Okay. Ushar kol mekomis, and any of the other places, kofin alav psachtar, you just kind of flip over some kind of like kli to cover it up, and then you wait till after Shabbos, and then you remove it. Reb Shimon Omer, says Reb Shimon, makom shetir lecha chachamim mishal chanasnu lecha shelo yitir lecha Ela Mishum Shvus, and that is how the Mishnayos of Masechta Ayruvin concludes. It's a little bit esoteric. The Gemara is going to explain to us what it means, but I'll just translate it literally for now. That Reb Shimon says that a place where the Chachamim permitted to you, they permitted what's rightfully yours to you, and they only permitted to you Mishum Shvus because of a Gezer Derabanan. We're going to have to explain what that means. And with that, we conclude the Mishnayos of Masechta Ayruvin. Chevra, let's take a look at the Gemara. Omer Rav Tevi bar Kisna, Omer Shmuel, Hamachnis Tamei Tmei Sheretz L'Mikdash Chayv. If you bring something that became Tamei from a Sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be Chayv. So, for example, if you, let's say, have some kind of, let's say it's a towel, let's just say, and a dead sheretz falls in the towel. So that towel is going to become tamei. If you take that towel with you into the Beis Hamikdash, you're in big trouble. Sheretz atzmo, but if you take a sheretz itself, you carry a sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash, so then potter, you're going to be potter for that. Now, mistama, you have to make sure that you yourself do not become tamei, because then you're in trouble. But let's say maybe you're carrying it in a bag or something like that. I think that would be okay, because it's not, sheretz is not matami b'masa, I believe. So, fine. Very good. So that's the important thing, that according to Shmuel, you are potter for taking a sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash. My time, how come? Well, the pasuk says, Mizocher v'nekeva t'shalechu. You have to send away from the Beis Hamikdash males and females. Mishyesh lo tayr b'mikvah, yotza sheretz she'en lo tayr b'mikvah. So meaning, what do we learn out from males and females? People / things that can become tahor by going in the mikvah, right? A person's tamei, go in the mikvah, you become tahor. So anything that can become tahor by putting in the mikvah, so then you're going to be chayav if it goes into the Beis Hamikdash. A sheretz, however, which chucking it into a mikvah does not make it a dead sheretz. If you throw it into the mikvah, it will not become tahor. Well, if you bring it into the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be chayav. No. You are not going to be chayiv. You're going to be potter. Fine. Let's say that the following brisa supports Shmuel. Mizacher ad nekeva tishalechu, that men and women you have to send away. Prat lichlei cheres divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili, to the exclusion of earthenware vessels. That is Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. My timer, how come? Lav mishum deleis leitayr b'mikveh. Is it not because earthenware vessels do not have a purification in the mikveh? Right? Meaning Rabbi Yossi Aglili is saying that from the fact that it says Mizacher v'ad nekeva t'shalechu, we exclude earthenware vessels. So we want to explain that is because earthenware vessels cannot become tahor in the mikvah, and therefore that would be a support for Shmuel that anything that cannot become tahor in the mikvah, you're potter for bringing into the Beis hamikdash, and therefore a sheretz would be potter for. So the Gemara says, "Lo mishnaisa avatuma yotze klicher she'enu naisa avatuma." No, the point is that mizocher ad nekeva tishalechu means something that can become an avatuma, right? A person can become an avatuma. They touch a aviavosatuma. If they touch a dead body, they become an avatuma. So anything that is able to become an avatuma, you will be chayiv for if you bring it into the Beis hamikdash, to the exclusion of cheres, which cannot become an avatuma, because there's only two ways that it could theoretically become an avatuma. One is like midras hazav, for example. If a zav were to sit on something, so it becomes an avatuma, just like the zav himself. However, a klicheres, as we learned in the Gemara in Shabbos, and Daf Pei Daled, klicheres does not receive tumas midras. And additionally, a klicheres, if it comes in contact with a mace, does not contract tuma. So therefore, since a klicheres is unable to become an avatuma, so therefore you are potter if you bring it into the Beis hamikdash. However, a sheretz, it's an avatuma. That's what it is. A dead sheretz is an avatuma. So therefore, it would be included in the prohibition of bringing it to the Beis hamikdash. And if you bring it into the Beis hamikdash, you're in big trouble. The Gemara says, let's say that this is machlokas tanaim, right? Whether or not you're chayav for bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis hamikdash, let's say it's machlokas tanaim. Lemaisa, from our Mishnah, sheretz shenimtza b'mikdash, if you find a dead sheretz in the Beis hamikdash, kohen motzio be'amyano, the kohen removes the dead sheretz by picking it up with his belt. Shlolashos esatuma divrei Yochanan ben Broka, so as not to keep the tuma in the Beis hamikdash, to prolong the tuma in the Beis hamikdash. That is Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda b'tzvas shel eitz motzio, that you remove the sheretz, the dead sheretz, with a wooden tweezers, shelo larbos esatuma, so as not to spread the tuma. My lav ba'okam miflege. Let's say that the following is the machlokas. Demanda Omer shelo lashos kosavar machnes sheretz l'mikdash chayav. So let's say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says that pick up the dead sheretz with your belt and get it out ASAP, let's say that bringing a sheretz into the Beis hamikdash is chayav, right? And we learn that from the pasuk that says mizocher ve'ad nekeva tishalechu, that zocher ad nekeva you have to send away, right? That's where we learn out that you have to get items away from the Beis hamikdash, and therefore, if we're going to say that a dead sheretz is included in that prohibition, right, i.e. you have to keep a dead sheretz away, well then get it out ASAP. Whereas, umanda Omer shelo larbos kosavar machnes sheretz l'mikdash potter, and we'll say that Rabbi Yehuda, who says rather use wooden pshutei klei eitz, because he would prefer to leave the sheretz there for a little bit longer if it means that we won't be spreading tumah, well, then he'll say that this pasuk of mizocher v'nekeva tishalechu, of send these things away from the Beis hamikdash, does not apply to a sheretz. And if you find the sheretz, I mean, it's certainly not an ideal situation, but, you don't have to, the most important thing, the most critical thing is not to just get it out of there ASAP. Rather, we don't want to spread the tumah, and therefore get pshutei klei eitz and remove it that way, even if it means taking another minute. Okay, so the Gemara says, do not, tie the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and Rabbi Yehuda into this sort of narrative of are you chayiv for bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis hamikdash or not? Duchuli alma chayiv, because both Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and Rabbi Yehuda agree that if you bring a dead sheretz into the Beis hamikdash, you're going to be chayav. Okay, and this is the machlokas between them. So Rabbi Yehuda says that it would be preferable to leave the dead sheretz in the Beis hamikdash for longer in the interest of containing the tumah and not spreading it to your belt. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says it's preferable to spread the tumah to your belt, but get it out of the Beis Hamikdash as soon as possible, rather than to leave it for even one instant longer than you need to. But both agree that you would be chayiv for bringing the sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash. The question is just what's the best way to deal with that non-ideal situation. Ela kahani tanai. Okay, well then let's look further in our Mishnah and say that maybe the machlokas between Reb Shimon ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva, maybe we can glean some insight into whether or not you could bring your chayiv for bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash from their machlokas. Titnan, as we learn in our Mishnah, mehechan motziin also chulei. Right, from where do you remove this dead sheretz? Reb Shimon ben Nanas said from the heichal, from the ulam, and miben ulam v'lamizbeach. Whereas Rabbi Akiva said that even in addition to that, you're also going to be chayiv for the entire azara. You'd have to remove the sheretz from the entire azara. So ma'ala ba'akom iflage t'mando omer me azara lo kasav amachnis sheretz lamikdash pater. So let's say that Reb Shimon ben Nanas, who says that you're chayiv for the heichal, for the ulam, and bein ulam v'lamizbeach, but not for the rest of the azara. So he'll say that you're not chayav for bringing a sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, if there's a sheretz in the heichal or the ulam or ben ulam v'lamizbeach, so you got to get it out of there because it's not mechubad. It's a lack of honor to have a dead sheretz there. But you're not going to be necessarily chayav for bringing it into the Beis Hamikdash. Whereas umanda amar mikula azar kasavar chayav. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, who says that you have to remove the dead sheretz from the entire azara, well, that's very similar, but that's because you're going to be chayiv. It's just like, a person who's tameh. If he goes into the azara, he's going to be chayiv. Well, also, that's why the same areas apply to this sheretz, right? Meaning, after all, Rabbi Akiva's whole logic was any place where you'd be chayiv kares by on purpose and a korban chatas by accident, so that is where a dead sheretz applies. Well, he's kind of connecting the chiyuv of the dead sheretz to the chiyuv of, or the removal of the dead sheretz to the chiyuv of people who are tameh. So therefore, let's argue that Rabbi Akiva would say that bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash you would be chayav for. So we're trying to say that the machlokas that Reb Shimon ben Nanas would say that bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash you would be potter, like Shmuel says, and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Akiva would say that bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash you would be chayav. So Rabbi Yochanan says no. Both Reb Shimon ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva hold that if you bring a dead sheretz into the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to be chayav. Okay. Now, in terms of where do you need to remove the dead sheretz from, so even though you'd be chayav for bringing it into the Beis Hamikdash, in terms of its removal, they learn out where you have to remove it from the same pasuk, but they just learn the same pasuk differently. So pasuk in Divrei Hayomim, the pasuk says, "Vayavo haKohanim lefnima Beis Hashem." That when the Kohanim came back to the Beis Hamikdash, they found lots of avodah zarah over there, and they had to clean it out. So vayavo haKohanim lefnima Beis Hashem, that the Kohanim came into the heichal and they found l'tayir vayotziu es kol hatuma, in order to make it pure, and they took out all of the impurities, i.e., all of the avodah zarah that they found there. Asher matzu beichal Hashem lechatza Beis Hashem. So they brought out the avodah zarah from the heichal into the azara. Vayikavlu alevim lootzi lenachal kidron, and from there the Leviim took the avodah zarah to nachal kidron chutza outside. So basically, what happened is you have the Kohanim. The Kohanim went into the heichal, and they took the avodah zarah out of the heichal and they brought it into the azara. And from the azara, the Leviim then took over and took it out of the Beis Hamikdash. So now, Mar Saver midi ishtini ba'azara ba'Leviim tum ba'azara leko. So, Reb Shimon ben Nanas learns this pasuk as saying, well, what are we seeing? We're seeing that, it was, even though Kohanim are not allowed to become tameh, in the interest of getting the avodah zarah, getting the tumah out of the heichal, they're even allowed to become tameh. But once it got into the azara, they're no longer able to become tameh. At that point, the Leviim took over. So what do we see? So we see that removing tumah from the Beis Hamikdash is really critical when it's in the heichal. But once it's in the azara already, it's not as critical, and therefore on Shabbos, if you have a dead sheretz over there, we're not going to sort of override the gzera of muktzeh to remove it from the azara. But out of the heichal, that's pretty serious, and we get rid of it. Whereas Umar Savar, Rabbi Akiva holds ad heicha delo efshar b'leviim mafke kohanim, hashad efshar b'leviim sulub n'tamei kohanim. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says no, you got to get this avodah zara out of the Beis hamikdash, right, out of the azara as well. That's for sure. Okay, so then how come the switch from kohanim to leviim at the in the azara? Well, because I guess ideally the kohanim shouldn't become tamei whatsoever. The thing is, they're the only ones who are allowed to go into the heichal. So they went into the heichal, they took out the avodah zara from there, but at that point, kohanim, there's no need for the kohanim to become tamei anymore. At that point, the leviim could take over. But certainly, you have to get out this this tumah from the azara as well. So that is a machlokas between Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas and Rabbi Akiva in terms of where do you have to remove the tumah from. However, they would both agree that you'd be chayav for bringing a dead sheretz into the Beis hamikdash. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught hakol nechnasim beheichal livnos lesaken ulehotzi es hatuma, that anybody can theoretically go into the heichal in order to, if you have to build something, or if you have to fix something, or if you have to take out tumah, anybody can go in to do that. Umitzvah b'kohanim. However, ideally, the person who goes in should be a kohen. Im ein sham kohanim nechnasim levim. But if there are no kohanim, then a Levi can go in to do these things. Ein sham levim nechnasim Yisraelim. If there are no Levites, well then Israelites can go in. Ve'idi tehorin. Now, whoever goes in will have to be tahor. Tahorin in tmein lo. Fine. Amr Rav Huna, says Rav Huna, Rav Kahanim sayeh kahane. That's interesting. That Rav Kahana, there's a girsa that says the Kahanahu, that he himself was a Kohen. So Rav Kahana was always looking out for his fellow Kohanim to support, to help out his Kohanim. So the Tani Rav Kahana, that he taught mitoch shenemar, because it says ach el paroches lo yavo. It says by Kohanim that have a mum that they do not go to the paroches. So yachol lo yu Kohanim bali mumin nechnasen beina ulam v'lamizbeach lasos yikui pachim. Is it possible that Kohanim that have a mum would be unable to go to the area between the mizbeach and the ulam in order to make these, to beat out gold plates for the kodesh hakodashim? Tamulomer ach chalek. So the pasuk says ach ela paroches le'avo. So ach is like a exclusion, like a limitation. So it means to divide it up, make a chiluk. So mitzvah b'tmimim. So ideally, the people who should be doing these avodas would be people that do not, kohanim that do not have a mum. Ein sham tmimim nechnasim ba'alei mumin. If you can't find a kohen to do this work that has without a mum, so then you can use a kohen that has a mum, a blemish. Mitzvah b'torin, ein sham torin nechnasim tmein. Ideally, you should use somebody who's tahor. If there's nobody who's tahor, then you can use somebody who's tamei. Idi v'idi kohanim in Yisraelim lo. But either way, you should use somebody who's a kohen, not somebody who is a Yisrael. So, according to Rav Kahana, really the person that goes in to do these jobs should be a kohen. Now, Ibailu, they asked the kasha, Tomei uvalmum ezumei nichnas. So, we said that between a tamim and a ba'almum, the tamim, the person without a blemish, gets precedence. And we said between a tamei and a tahor, the tahor gets precedence. What about between a tamei and a ba'almum? So Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav tamei nichnas to ishtri b'avodas tzibur. So Rav Chia bar Ashi says the name of Rav that if it's between a tamei kohen or a kohen with a ba'almum, preference goes to the tamei kohen, since if there's a situation where the majority of the kohanim are tamei, you would nonetheless be able to do the communal offerings tamei in that situation. So therefore, since over there a tamei person can do the avoda, so he gets preference over a ba'almum who can never do avoda. Rabbi Elazar Omer says, Rabbi Elazar, ba'almum nichnas, that preference goes to the kohen with the blemish, to ishtri b'achilas kodshim, because he's allowed to eat kodshim, he's allowed to eat meat of korbanos, whereas a kohen who's tamei is unable to do that. Okay. Reb Shimon Omer v'chule. So Reb Shimon had said, right, what did Reb Shimon say in the Mishnah? He said, Makom she'itiru l'cha chachamim mishelcha itiru l'cha. That a place where the chachamim permitted you, and they permitted you of your own. What does that mean? So Gemara wants to know, Reb Shimon heicha kai, what is Reb Shimon going on? What's he referring to? What's he talking about? So Hasam kai, he's talking about a Mishnah that we saw on Daf Nun Beis. I hope everybody remembers this Mishnah. Titznan, as we learned in the Mishnah, mishehichshech chutz letchum. Let's say somebody's rushing back to get home before Shabbos, and it mamish gets dark, and he's one step away from entering into the tchum. Afilu ama achas lo yikanes. Sorry, Buster. You're just going to have to sit there staring at the tchum and your house and feeling terrible about yourself that you mamish got within one step of the tchum and you missed it. You got to stay there for all of Shabbos. You can't take even one step right after Shabbos begins. You cannot even take one extra step to get into the tchum. Reb Shimon Omer, afilu chomesh esrei ama yikanes. Reb Shimon says that no, you can even go 15 amis into the tchum. Lefi she'ein ha-meshuchis mematzin es amidos mipnei hatoim. Because the people who put out the measurements, who measure the tchums, they deliberately make it shorter so that people will not make a mistake, right? That around the city there were markers where the tchum ends. But Reb Shimon says the truth of the matter is that the people who would put out these markers, they would actually cut it a little bit short. They would put out the markers actually before the tchum really ended, so that if somebody makes a mistake and accidentally goes past the marker, they'll still remain within the tchum and they can still go back. So therefore, if you're rushing before Shabbos and you mamish are within, even if you're within 15 feet outside of the marker, you'll still be able to go into the tchum and into the city, since the fact of the matter is that you're really already within 2,000 amos of the city, just that the marker people make the tchum shorter so that people don't make mistakes. Fine. The Tanakama lo yikanes, the Amar le Reb Shimon yikanes, and Tanakama says he shouldn't go in, Reb Shimon says he can go in, and Reb Shimon is saying that there's no leniency happening over here. It's right. What does the Mishnah say? Right? Mishelcha nasnu lecha. They're really just giving to you what's rightfully yours. The fact of the matter is you're already within the 2,000 amos of the city. Okay. Shelo itir lecha ela mishum shvus. Then he says that what they only allowed you out of shvus. Hey Chakai, what's he talking about? They only allowed you out of shvus. So he's going on what we learned on Daf, what was it, Kuf Gimel? Yeah, Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, that Hasam Kai Dika Amar Tanakama Koshra. The Tanakama says that you tie a string of a musical instrument that's snapped on Shabbos. If you're a Levite and you're playing your musical instrument and it snaps on Shabbos, so the Tanakama says you can tie it together, tie the broken pieces together, the broken strings. Ve'amar le Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon says onva, tie it in a bow. Aniva de lo asli de chiyuv chatas sharu le rabbanon, that tying in a bow, which will not lead to a chiyuv chatas, so that is what you're allowed to do in the Beis hamikdash. Kshira de asi li de chiyuv chatas lo sharu le rabbanon, but tying the string, which would be kosher, which is an av melacha, you would be unable to do, i.e. he's not going to say machshirei mitzvah dochenes haShabbos, which is interesting because we had different we had three ukimtas over there by the string of the musical instrument. In one of them Rabbi Shimon agreed with the Tanakama that we would say machshirei mitzvah dochenes haShabbos, which is actually the last ukimta, but we're saying no, only dirabbanans would be able to be doche, and apparently Reb Shimon then holds that tying in a bow is also midirabbanon. Hadronalach amotzi tefillin uslikala meseches Ayruvin. Chevre, what can I tell you? Mazel tov. Wow. Whew. Crazy, right? What do you guys think? I mean, I think Masechta Ayruvin, I'm pretty sure Masechta Ayruvin was the most difficult Masechta of Shas that I've ever learned. This was hard stuff, man. Well, Chevra, so as Reb Neil pointed out for all of us in WhatsApp the other day, sure, it was a challenging Masechta, but there was so much beauty to be found in this Masechta as well. Anyways, yeah, I mean, as I pointed out in WhatsApp, but just in general, I love connecting to like Tanaim and Amoraim, and what stuck out mostly was, right, Reb Meir, that nobody in Reb Meir's generation was like him, and how he was kind of like in a league of his own. Reb Yossi, and then of course other Tanaim and Amoraim along the way. But yeah, a lot of beauty in this Masechta. Al Koponim, it was a pleasure learning with everybody, and babble on. And I'll see you tomorrow with Masechta Psachim. Mazel Tov. Peace out.